They say Rome wasn't built in a day, but let me tell you, it could take just one day to break you in ancient Rome. The air was heavy, not just with the smoke from braziers and clay ovens, but with something else. Expectation, maybe, or fear. Maybe it was the weight of survival itself, pressing down on everyone's shoulders like the midday sun over the forum. The streets didn't smell like victory or glory. They smelled like sweat, wine, dust, and desperation. You wouldn't have lasted an hour. Picture this. You're standing barefoot on cobblestones, still damp from a morning dew. The sandals they gave you feel like thin scraps of leather barely stitched together. They pinch your feet, but you don't dare complain. Your Latin is laughable, your clothes don't fit, and the look the baker just gave you suggests he knows you're not from around here. The year is 75 BCE. Julius Caesar isn't yet a household name, but there's already talk in the markets about some young aristocrat rising fast in the political ranks. It's just another whisper in a city full of secrets. Your name is irrelevant here. So is your status. Your accent gives you away. You could be from Gaul or Hispania, or maybe from far across the seas. But none of that matters to the men sweeping the streets or hauling amphorae of olive oil on their backs. What matters is how quickly you adapt. And you're not adapting quickly. You're hungry. That's the first real feeling you get deep in your stomach like a knot. Bread isn't free. And even if it were, it's not the soft, fluffy kind you're used to. It's coarse, gritty, baked with bits of ground stone from the mill. Every bite wears your teeth down just a little more. You won't notice it now, but give it a few weeks and chewing will start to hurt. You've been assigned to a domus on the Aventine Hill. Not a grand place. Just a small household with a middle-ranking magistrate who's already suspicious of you. He thinks you're lazy. You were late this morning. No one told you the sun, not a clock, was your new alarm. The slaves in the house have already learned not to look you in the eye. Not because they're afraid of you. Far from it. It's because they've seen dozens like you come and go. Some collapsed from exhaustion. Some were sent away after one mistake too many. One girl, a scrawny teen for the eastern provinces, vanished overnight. No one speaks of her. No one asks. The streets are alive with noise. Metal clinking, hooves clattering, voices shouting in half a dozen dialects. You dodge a runaway cart, nearly slipping on a pile of what you hope is just mud. No one helps you. You're invisible. Or worse, you're in the way. You try to find the bathhouse someone mentioned yesterday. Maybe there, you think, you'll find relief. A moment of warmth. A chance to breathe. But the baths aren't what you imagined. Sure, they're warm and crowded. Packed, actually. Men of all sizes and ranks scrub themselves raw, talking politics and trade deals while their slaves run errands. The air is thick with steam and body odor. You sit for a moment, but it's not peaceful. It's loud, overwhelming. Someone mocks your accent. You pretend not to hear. Later, you make your way to the edge of the city. The smell changes. Less bread and wine, more blood and waste. You're near the tanneries now, where skins are soaked in urine and chemicals that sting your eyes. Workers stare at you with a kind of dead calm, the look of men who've given up dreaming. You turn away quickly. Night falls faster than you expect. There's no electric light here, just torches and oil lamps. Shadows stretch long over the alleyways. You realize, too late, that you're lost. The buildings all look the same now. The domus is somewhere behind you, but every turn seems to take you further from safety. Somewhere nearby, you hear raised voices, then silence. Then footsteps. You duck behind a broken pillar, heart pounding. You thought this was a city of marble and law. But here, in the dark, Rome is something else. Something colder. Something older. A shape passes close. You don't breathe. Not until it's gone. When you finally make it back, hours later, the magistrate is waiting. He doesn't speak, just gestures toward the floor. You'll sleep there tonight. No blanket, no pillow. Tomorrow, you'll rise before dawn and carry water up 3 flights of stairs. Again, and again, and again. This isn't history from a textbook. It's not gladiators and gold statues. It's bruised feet, cracked hands, and a constant gnawing in your stomach. It's understanding, deep in your bones, that one wrong move could mean exile or worse. And it's just the beginning. The next morning, The light creeps in before the birds even begin to chirp. The chill bites at your skin as you sit up from the hard floor, stiff and sore, muscles aching in places you didn't know existed. The house is already alive with whispers and the clatter of morning preparations. The magistrate's wife speaks with sharp authority, her words slicing through the thick air. No one dares respond unless asked. You learn to mimic the silence. Your task today is simple, or so they say. Fetch water, then sweep the courtyard, then help in the kitchen, though you're not allowed to cook. Only assist, carefully, quietly. Then walk with the magistrate into the forum and stay one step behind him. Not two, not beside, one step. You forget this once and feel the sting of a backhand before the second bell. You're not the only one enduring this life, but somehow that doesn't help. In the kitchen, a boy named Livius works beside you. His eyes are sunken, and there's a fresh cut on his knuckle. You don't ask. You don't want to know. He tells you in a low voice that he's been here for 3 years and still gets the wrong end of the broom. He says it like it's just a fact of life, the way you'd comment on the weather. The forum is a strange place. Grand, yes. Impressive, with its towering columns and endless rows of statues, but also loud, chaotic, and confusing. Men in togas argue about politics, grain, and taxes while beggars cling to the edges, hands outstretched. Soldiers swagger past with grim expressions, their sandals slapping the stones in unison. And then there are the merchants, shouting over each other, hawking everything from dates and fish to silver trinkets and cheap wool. Someone brushes past you, muttering. You can't tell if it's an insult or not. Doesn't matter. You're not welcome here. The magistrate leaves you standing near a marble column while he steps inside a shaded hall. You're not allowed in, of course. You just wait. Minutes stretch into hours. Your feet hurt, your stomach growls, and the sun slowly roasts the back of your neck. When he finally emerges, he doesn't look at you. Just starts walking. You follow. Back home, lunch is served but not to you. You eat the leftovers after the family finishes. The scraps that aren't too burned or too small. The bread is older, crust tougher. Still, you're grateful. You saw a child in the alley yesterday who didn't look like he'd eaten in days. Later, you help clean the atrium. A guest is coming tonight, some senator with more rings than fingers. The entire household shifts in a high gear. Even the cook, usually stoic, starts barking orders like a legionnaire. Everything must be perfect. The senator arrives with little fanfare, but brings with him an entourage of advisors and friends. You stay out of sight as instructed, but catch glimpses, fine clothes, soft voices, a whiff of imported perfume. These people live in another Rome, a place of silk cushions and slow meals. A world you can see but never touch. At some point, a goblet spills. Wine splashes across the mosaic floor. You rush in with a cloth, but it's too late. The senator glares. The magistrate mutters something about discipline. You nod and retreat. You're learning that speed won't save you. Only invisibility might. That night, you lie awake on the cold stone again. Your arms tremble from exhaustion, but your mind races. What happens if you get sick here? What if you twist your ankle carrying water? Would they let you rest? Or would they simply replace you? Sleep doesn't come easy. It never does when the silence feels heavier than the noise. In the days that follow, you try to blend in. You copy the others, how they move, how they speak, how they stay out of the way. You keep your head down. You memorize the sounds of the house, the scrape of sandals, the swish of linen robes, the creak of the kitchen door. Still, mistakes happen. Once, you pour too much wine at dinner. Another time, you're late returning from the market because a cart tipped over and blocked the road. The magistrate doesn't ask for excuses. He doesn't want explanations. Only results. You begin to understand the hierarchy here. Not just the legal one, but the unspoken one. The street vendors scowl at you, knowing you carry coins but none of your own. The guards laugh when you pass, not cruelly, just carelessly. You're a blur to them, one of thousands. Replaceable, forgettable. And yet, there are moments. Small ones. A warm fig, handed to you by Livius when no one's looking. A brief sunset over the rooftops while you empty chamber pots. A dog that follows you for 2 blocks and doesn't bark. These tiny sparks keep you moving. Until the night, everything changes. It starts with a whisper, a rumor in the kitchen. A senator's nephew was found dead. Poison, they say. Not just any senator, one of the powerful ones. The kind who knows the emperor's name. They say the poison was slipped into a cup by a servant. No one knows who. No one saw anything. But everyone is afraid. The magistrate returns home, tense, shouting at shadows. He orders all the servants searched. He makes you stand in the atrium, arms raised, as guards pat you down. You've done nothing, but that doesn't matter. The atmosphere shifts. Even the wife is quieter now. The household staff speak in hushed voices. People avoid the senator's name like it's cursed. A day later, 2 slaves vanish from the house. Taken. No explanation. Just gone. You want to leave. You think about running. But where would you go? You have no money. No allies. The gates are watched. Then, one evening, the magistrate calls for you. Just you. He's sitting alone in the triclinium, sipping watered wine, eyes bloodshot. He gestures for you to kneel. You obey. You've been here a few weeks now, he says slowly. Tell me, do you know how to keep a secret? Your mouth is dry. You nod, unsure. He leans in. Because someone in this house is lying to me. And I think it might be you. You try not to blink, not to breathe too fast. You shake your head slowly, hoping that will be enough. The magistrate studies you, his gaze heavy, tired. He leans back with a long sigh and waves you away. But the damage is done. The rest of the evening, you feel eyes on you. Livius avoids you. The cook won't speak to you. Even the dog you sometimes feed barks when you pass. The seed of doubt has been planted, and in Rome, that seed can grow fast and deadly. Over the next few days, the tension coils tighter. Soldiers arrive at the house. Not many, just enough to make people uneasy. One of them questions you, asking where you were the night of the senator's visit. You try to answer, but the words tangle. You're not used to being spoken to like that. You get nervous. The soldier notes it down. Then they search your sleeping mat. They find nothing, of course. But nothing doesn't always mean safe. Whispers continue in corners behind hands. Another servant goes missing. You hear she was seen crying near the garden before being dragged off in the early hours. The others pretend not to notice. Everyone moves a little faster now, makes fewer mistakes, speaks only when spoken to. You want to scream. You want to wake up in your own bed, in your own time, far from marble floors and iron chains. But this is your life now. This is ancient Rome. Not the clean, sculpted one in museum photos, but the real Rome, where fear rules just as much as Caesar does. And still you carry on. Because what choice do you have? One afternoon, you're sent to the market alone. The magistrate's guard usually follows you, but today, you're alone. You don't question it. You keep your head down, your list tight in your hand. The market smells like smoke and sweat and raw fish. The stalls are alive with shouting, bartering, begging. You slip between them, try not to touch anyone, not to stand out. You reach for a basket of lentils when someone taps your arm. It's a woman, older, hunched, with a shawl wrapped around her head. Her eyes lock onto yours. Careful, little bird, she says softly. You're in a lion's cage. You don't know what she means. You try to pull away, but she presses something into your palm before disappearing into the crowd. You open your hand. It's a small token, a carving of a wolf. Your heart pounds. What does it mean? Back at the house, the magistrate's wife demands the lentils immediately. You nearly drop them. You stash the wolf token beneath your mat later, unsure what else to do. That night, you dream of fire and shadows and wolves howling at a red sky. When you wake, the sky is still dark. But there's a noise. Something wrong. Shouts. Then metal clanging. Then silence. You sit up. The hallway outside is dim, the oil lamp flickering. You hear sandals approaching. Livius bursts into the room. His face is pale, his lips trembling. They've taken him, he whispers. Boo! The magistrate. The soldiers. Just now. Dragged him out. They said he was part of the poisoning. You sit frozen. The magistrate? The man who held power over everyone in this house. He was trying to cover it up, Livius says. But they found something. Letters, maybe, hidden in his study. You remember his question. Do you know how to keep a secret? Was he trying to pull you in, or warn you. You want answers, but Rome rarely gives them. It only gives more questions. By morning, a new man is in charge of the house. A distant cousin of the magistrate, sent to manage affairs while the legal mess unfolds. He's colder, stricter, doesn't even pretend to be fair. You learn quickly. There's always someone above you. Someone watching. The days drag on. You lose track of how long you've been here. Weeks? Months? It all bleeds together. Then the woman returns. You spot her near the bathhouse, carrying a basket of herbs. She nods at you, but doesn't approach. That night, under your mat, you find another token. A message carved into the back. Tomorrow. Gate of Hercules. Sunset. You stare at the words for what feels like hours. What is this? A trap? A rescue? A test? You debate with yourself all night. If you're caught leaving the house, they'll flog you. Maybe worse. But if you stay here, if you do nothing, you'll rot away like the others. Slowly, quietly. At sunset, you make your choice. You slip out the side gate during a busy moment, arms full of laundry, head bowed. No one stops you. You walk fast, but not too fast, past the bakery, the olive vendor, the temple steps. The Gate of Hercules stands tall at the edge of the district, carved with fading images of battles and gods. You wait beside it, heart hammering. Minutes pass. You start to doubt everything. Then she appears. The woman. The shawl. The eyes. You're late, she says, but not unkindly. She leads you into a narrow alley. Then another. Finally, into a small room behind a wine shop, lit with a single flickering lamp. 3 others are inside. Young, tense, quiet. You're not the first, she says, unwrapping her shawl. And you won't be the last. You ask her what this is. She only smiles. A different kind of Rome, she says. One that lives in the cracks. One that watches while the statues crumble. She hands you a folded piece of parchment. Inside, a map. A route. A name. Leave before the moon is high, she warns. You have one chance. Before you can ask what she means, the door opens again. A man in a worn cloak steps in. His eyes scan the room. When they land on you, he nods. We've been waiting for you, he says. And suddenly, the weight of the past weeks, the fear, the hunger, the silence, it all feels like the beginning of something much bigger. You hold the map tighter. You don't know what's ahead, but for the first time since arriving in Rome, you're not just surviving, you're part of something, and that makes you dangerous. The man says nothing more. He turns and walks out of the wine shop. The others in the room silently follow. You hesitate, your heart pounding in your throat, but your legs carry you forward. There's no turning back now. You follow them down a maze of alleys, deeper into the city's underbelly. The road's narrow. The air thickens. Rome at night feels different. Not asleep, just waiting, watching. The torches on the main roads are long behind you now. What remains are shadows and whispers. Finally, the group stops outside a crumbling archway behind what looks like a laundry. The man kneels, lifts a stone slab from the ground, and motions for you to climb down. You hesitate, but only for a second. Then you descend. It's dark at first, the air cool and damp. But soon, torchlight flickers ahead. You step into a low chamber, part cellar, part tunnel, lined with clay jars and worn wooden benches. About a dozen people are inside. Men, women, even a boy no older than 12. They speak in hushed tones. Some carry scrolls, others tools. The man turns to you. Welcome, he says. This is the Sub Rosa. You blink. You've heard the phrase before. It means under the rose. A Roman symbol for secrecy. Everyone here, he continues, has seen what you've seen. The cruelty, the lies, the rot beneath the marble. We collect stories, names, evidence, not to fight with swords, but with truth. You listen carefully. It sounds noble, but also sounds dangerous. Why me? You ask. He raises an eyebrow. Because the magistrate trusted you with a secret. Because you kept quiet when you were afraid. Because you asked no one for help and still survived. That's rare. You don't feel brave. You feel exhausted. But something deep in you sparks. You're given a place to sleep. Not a bed, just straw and cloth in a back room. It's warmer than your mat in the magistrate's house. Quieter, too. That night, for the first time in weeks, you sleep without dreaming. In the morning, they give you a task. Deliver this scroll, the woman with the shawl says, to the tanner shop near the Aventine. Don't let anyone else touch it. You nod, wrapping it inside your tunic. Outside, the city is already alive, the smell of fresh bread mixing with the stench of the river. You move through it like smoke. But as you pass the fountain near the baths, you hear it. Your name, called out twice. Softly, you turn. Livius. He stands near a vendor, wearing the tunic of a street cleaner. His hair's shorter, his eyes sharper. What are you doing? He whispers. They say you disappeared. You step closer, confused. The house, the guards, the new master. He thinks you stole something. I didn't, you begin. I know, he interrupts. But they don't care. He glances around. They put up a notice this morning. Your face. A reward. You feel the ground shift beneath you. Livius looks at your tunic, sees the scroll's outline. He says nothing. Whatever you're involved in, he says, be careful. Rome has ears. And worse, Rome has eyes. You part ways without another word. Back at the Sub Rosa, you deliver the scroll. The man reads your face before he even unrolls it. They know you're gone, he says simply. You nod. No choice, then, he murmurs. We move tonight. Move? He doesn't explain. No one does. But by sunset, everyone is packing. Scrolls are burned. Seals destroyed. Crates loaded onto carts bound for the edge of the city. You're given a new tunic, plainer, rougher. A new name. Not that you'll need to speak it aloud. From now on, the woman says, you listen more than you talk. You watch. You write. And when you see something that doesn't belong, someone mistreated, someone silenced, you remember. You remember everything. You nod. It's a strange feeling, being trusted with something invisible, but also powerful. That night, as the torches dim, the Sub Rosa vanishes. You slip out through a tunnel beneath the old aqueduct, walking hours until your legs ache and your mind begins to blur. You pass out in a barn somewhere on the edge of the countryside, and when morning comes, you're someone else. For weeks, you drift. You become a scribe in a vineyard, then a pot boy in a tavern, then a stable hand near the Appian Way. Always watching, always listening. You see things no history book ever taught you. You see a nobleman bribe a judge with amphory of wine and a single golden ring. You see a slave boy beaten for speaking Latin too well. You see a woman jailed for telling the truth about a corrupt priest. You write it all down. In codes, on scraps of bark, in tiny wax tablets hidden in the soles of your sandals. Every few days, someone leaves you a new message. Sometimes it's hidden in a loaf of bread. Sometimes carved into a wall in the public latrines. Sub Rosa lives. Keep moving. Rome watches. But even in the shadows, even among secrets, there's a weight pressing in. A whisper of something darker. You begin to hear a name, always muttered, never written. Cassian. You ask one contact about it. He stiffens and refuses to speak. Another calls him the rat beneath the forum. Says he's not a person, but a curse. That wherever he goes, people vanish. Entire families. Whole streets swept clean like sand after a storm. But one night you see him. You're delivering a coded letter to a stonemason near the Esquiline Hill. The city is quiet. A festival has just ended, and the streets still echo with laughter. You pause near the temple of Jupiter to drink from a public fountain. And there he is, leaning in the shadow of a pillar. Cloak like tar. Smile like a knife. He looks at you. You look away. But you feel it. He knows you. You walk faster. You don't run. Not yet. You reach the stonemason's door. Knock twice, pause, then once. It opens. Go, the woman says, seeing your face. Go now. You enter through the front and exit out the back, into a courtyard lined with old vines and broken statues. Someone grabs your arm. You swing around. It's the man from the Sub Rosa, the one who welcomed you in. Don't go home, he says. Cassian is watching you now. You swallow hard. What does he want? He pauses. He wants the truth buried, just like everyone else in power. You shake your head. I'm no one. Exactly, the man says. And that's what makes you dangerous. The days that followed were a blur of movement and caution. You changed names as often as tunics. each identity a fragile shield against the ever-watchful eyes of Rome. The Sub-Rosa's network stretched farther than you'd imagined, with contacts in every corner of the city, each playing their part in this silent rebellion. Your tasks varied, delivering messages concealed within loaves of bread, eavesdropping on conversations in crowded bathhouses, and observing the comings and goings of influential figures. The city's underbelly was a labyrinth of secrets, and you were becoming adept at navigating its twists and turns. One evening, while posing as a scribe in a senator's household, you stumbled upon a conversation that sent chills down your spine. The senator spoke in hushed tones about a man named Cassian, describing him as a necessary evil, a tool used to maintain order and silence dissent. It became clear that Cassian was not just a myth, but a real and dangerous figure, employed by the powerful to quash any threats to their authority. The more you learned, the more you realized the depth of Rome's surveillance. Informants were everywhere, slaves, merchants, even children, all feeding information to those in power. Trust became a luxury you couldn't afford. Despite the danger, your resolve strengthened. The Sub-Rosa's mission resonated deeply within you. You weren't just surviving. You were fighting for a Rome that valued truth over tyranny. One night, a message arrived instructing you to meet at the Temple of Saturn. There, you encountered a group of individuals who had suffered under the current regime, families torn apart, lives destroyed. Their stories fueled your determination, and together, you devised plans to expose the corruption festering within the Senate. But as your actions grew bolder, so did the risks. Cassian's presence loomed larger, his methods more ruthless. Whispers of disappearances and mysterious deaths circulated, each tale more harrowing than the last. Wikipedia, +12. Bedtime story, +12. Popular archaeology, +12. One evening, returning to your temporary quarters, you found a parchment slipped under the door. It bore a single sentence. You are known. The message was clear. Your cover was compromised. With the net tightening, you had to make a choice. Flee and preserve your life, or stay and continue the fight, knowing the cost. As dawn broke over the city, casting golden hues upon the ancient stones, you stood at a crossroads. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but the cause was just. Taking a deep breath, you stepped forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in your quest to unveil the truths hidden within Rome's shadows. The days that followed were a blur of movement and caution. You changed names as often as tunics, each identity a fragile shield against the ever-watchful eyes of Rome. The Sub-Rosa's network stretched farther than you'd imagined, with contacts in every corner of the city, each playing their part in this silent rebellion. Your tasks varied, delivering messages concealed within loaves of bread, eavesdropping on conversations in crowded bathhouses, and observing the comings and goings of influential figures. The city's underbelly was a labyrinth of secrets, and you were becoming adept at navigating its twists and turns. One evening, while posing as a scribe in a senator's household, you stumbled upon a conversation that sent chills down your spine. The senator spoke in hushed tones about a man named Cassian, describing him as a necessary evil, a tool used to maintain order and silence dissent. It became clear that Cassian was not just a myth, but a real and dangerous figure, employed by the powerful to quash any threats to their authority. The more you learned, the more you realized the depth of Rome's surveillance. Informants were everywhere, slaves, merchants, even children, all feeding information to those in power. Trust became a luxury you couldn't afford. Despite the danger, your resolve strengthened. The Sub-Rosa's mission resonated deeply within you. You weren't just surviving. You were fighting for a Rome that valued truth over tyranny. One night, a message arrived instructing you to meet at the Temple of Saturn. There, you encountered a group of individuals who had suffered under the current regime, families torn apart, lives destroyed. Their stories fueled your determination, and together, you devised plans to expose the corruption festering within the Senate. But as your actions grew bolder, so did the risks. Cassian's presence loomed larger, his methods more ruthless. Whispers of disappearances and mysterious deaths circulated, each tale more harrowing than the last. Reddit.com. +5. en.wikipedia.org. +5. en.wikipedia.org. +5. One evening, returning to your temporary quarters, you found a parchment slipped under the door. It bore a single sentence. You are known. The message was clear. Your cover was compromised. With the net tightening, you had to make a choice. Flee and preserve your life, or stay and continue the fight, knowing the cost. As dawn broke over the city, casting golden hues upon the ancient stones, you stood at a crossroads. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but the cause was just. Taking a deep breath, you stepped forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in your quest to unveil the truths hidden within Rome's shadows. The days that followed were a blur of movement and caution. You changed names as often as tunics, each identity a fragile shield against the ever-watchful eyes of Rome. The Sub-Rosa's network stretched farther than you'd imagined, with contacts in every corner of the city, each playing their part in this silent rebellion. Your tasks varied, delivering messages concealed within loaves of bread, eavesdropping on conversations in crowded bathhouses, and observing the comings and goings of influential figures. The city's underbelly was a labyrinth of secrets, and you were becoming adept at navigating its twists and turns. One evening, while posing as a scribe in a senator's household, you stumbled upon a conversation that sent chills down your spine. The senator spoke in hushed tones about a man named Cassian, describing him as a necessary evil, a tool used to maintain order and silence dissent. It became clear that Cassian was not just a myth, but a real and dangerous figure, employed by the powerful to quash any threats to their authority. The more you learned, the more you realized the depth of Rome's surveillance. Informants were everywhere, slaves, merchants, even children, all feeding information to those in power. Trust became a luxury you couldn't afford. Despite the danger, your resolve strengthened. The Sub-Rosa's mission resonated deeply within you. You weren't just surviving. You were fighting for a Rome that valued truth over tyranny. One night, a message arrived instructing you to meet at the Temple of Saturn. There, you encountered a group of individuals who had suffered under the current regime, families torn apart, lives destroyed. Their stories fueled your determination, and together, you devised plans to expose the corruption festering within the Senate. But as your actions grew bolder, so did the risks. Cassian's presence loomed larger, his methods more ruthless. Whispers of disappearances and mysterious deaths circulated, each tale more harrowing than the last. One evening, returning to your temporary quarters, you found a parchment slipped under the door. It bore a single sentence. You are known. The message was clear. Your cover was compromised. With the net tightening, you had to make a choice. Flee and preserve your life, or stay and continue the fight, knowing the cost. As dawn broke over the city, casting golden hues upon the ancient stones, you stood at a crossroads. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but the cause was just. Taking a deep breath, you stepped forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in your quest to unveil the truths hidden within Rome's shadows. The days that followed were a blur of movement and caution. You changed names as often as tunics, each identity a fragile shield against the ever-watchful eyes of Rome. The Sub-Rosa's network stretched farther than you'd imagined, with contacts in every corner of the city, each playing their part in this silent rebellion. Your tasks varied, delivering messages concealed within loaves of bread, eavesdropping on conversations in crowded bathhouses, and observing the comings and goings of influential figures. The city's underbelly was a labyrinth of secrets, and you were becoming adept at navigating its twists and turns. One evening, while posing as a scribe in a senator's household, you stumbled upon a conversation that sent chills down your spine. The senator spoke in hushed tones about a man named Cassian, describing him as a necessary evil, a tool used to maintain order and silence dissent. It became clear that Cassian was not just a myth, but a real and dangerous figure, employed by the powerful to quash any threats to their authority. The more you learned, the more you realized the depth of Rome's surveillance. Informants were everywhere, slaves, merchants, even children, all feeding information to those in power. Trust became a luxury you couldn't afford. Despite the danger, your resolve strengthened. The Sub Rosa's mission resonated deeply within you. You weren't just surviving. You were fighting for a Rome that valued truth over tyranny. One night, a message arrived instructing you to meet at the Temple of Saturn. There, you encountered a group of individuals who had suffered under the current regime, families torn apart, lives destroyed. Their stories fueled your determination, and together, you devised plans to expose the corruption festering within the Senate. But as your actions grew bolder, so did the risks. Cassian's presence loomed larger, his methods more ruthless. Whispers of disappearances and mysterious deaths circulated, each tale more harrowing than the last. One evening, returning to your temporary quarters, you found a parchment slipped under the door. It bore a single sentence: "You are known." The message was clear. Your cover was compromised. With the net tightening, you had to make a choice: flee and preserve your life, or stay and continue the fight, knowing the cost. As dawn broke over the city, casting golden hues upon the ancient stones, you stood at a crossroads. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but the cause was just. Taking a deep breath, you stepped forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in your quest to unveil the truths hidden within Rome's shadows. The streets of Rome never truly slept. Even as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city's marble statues cast long shadows, the whispers of conspiracy and power struggles pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the surface. You felt it, an almost tangible tension in the air, as if the entire city held its breath, waiting for a storm no one dared name. Your footsteps echoed quietly on the worn cobblestones as you moved swiftly through narrow alleys and shadowed courtyards. The moonlight barely filtered through the towering buildings, giving you just enough cover to avoid the prying eyes of Cassian's informants. Every corner could hide a spy. Every passerby might be the one to deliver the next deadly message. The risk was no longer just about survival. It was about whether the fragile hope you'd kindled could withstand the crushing weight of Rome's dark heart. That morning's warning, "You are known," played on repeat in your mind, a chilling reminder that your every move was under scrutiny. But retreat was not an option. The stories you'd heard at the Temple of Saturn, the faces of families torn apart by greed and cruelty, fueled a fire you couldn't extinguish. Your allies within Sub Rosa were scattered, each playing their part in a dangerous dance of deception. There was Livia, a skilled healer who secretly passed coded messages hidden within medicinal herbs. Then Marcus, a merchant whose caravans moved goods and secrets across the empire's borders. And Gaius, a disillusioned former soldier whose knowledge of Rome's military might was invaluable. Together, you discovered cracks in the Senate's facade, whispers of bribes, secret deals, and ruthless power grabs that kept the rich in control while the common people starved and suffered. It was a Rome of stark contrasts. Opulent banquets overshadowing desperate crowds begging for scraps. Grand forums echoing with speeches masking the screams of the oppressed. Cassian's shadow loomed large over all of this. Rumors told of his cold efficiency, a man who never hesitated to silence those who threatened the fragile order. They said he operated outside the law, yet no one dared question his authority. He was Rome's ghost enforcer, the silent blade beneath its polished surface. One evening, under the guise of a traveling merchant, you slipped into the bustling forum. The chatter was louder than usual, a mix of merchants hawking wares and citizens debating the latest edicts. You made your way to a discreet meeting point, an abandoned taberna rumored to be a safe house for dissenters. Inside, flickering oil lamps cast flickering shadows on the stone walls, illuminating a handful of faces etched with worry and determination. Livia was there, tending to a wounded man whose eyes gleamed with a fierce resolve. Marcus leaned against a wooden beam, speaking in low tones with Gaius, their conversation heavy with urgency. The room buzzed with a dangerous hope, the kind born from desperation and a shared belief that change was possible. You shared what you'd learned about Cassian's latest moves, how he'd infiltrated even the temples, spreading fear among the priests who once stood as Rome's moral compass. Suddenly, a sharp noise outside jolted everyone to alertness. The door creaked, then slammed open to reveal a cloaked figure. One of your contacts, breathless and pale. "They're coming," he whispered. "Cassian's men are sweeping the city tonight." A cold silence fell over the group. The reality of the threat was immediate and crushing. Plans you'd carefully crafted would be tested tonight. Some would flee, others would fight, but no one could ignore the storm about to descend. Your heart pounded as you glanced at the faces around you, each person knowing this night could be their last. Yet, in their eyes burned a shared truth. The fight for Rome's soul was worth any price. As the city's bells tolled midnight, the first footsteps of the hunt echoed in the distance. You gripped the small dagger hidden beneath your cloak, a symbol of defiance in a city ruled by shadows. The chase was on. The night air grew colder, sharp against your skin as you slipped silently through the twisting alleys. The city felt different now, like a beast stirring awake, its hunger palpable. You could hear the distant shouts of Cassian's men, their armor clinking like thunder rolling through the narrow streets. They were searching for you and your allies, hungry to snuff out the flicker of rebellion before it could grow into a flame. Your mind raced. Every step you took was measured, every shadow a potential hiding place or a trap. You knew Cassian's men were relentless, trained to track and capture without mercy. But what frightened you most wasn't just the soldiers. It was the realization that even the city's own people might turn against you. Informants lurked everywhere, their loyalty bought with silver or fear. You ducked into a small courtyard, heart pounding. The moon above was a thin crescent, offering little light, but just enough to see the worn stones beneath your feet. Suddenly, a soft sound caught your attention, a whispered name, barely audible. "Livia!" You froze. The voice came from a shadow near the fountain. You stepped closer, recognizing Marcus's familiar face emerging from the darkness. His eyes were wide with fear. "They've taken Gaius," he said, voice trembling. "They found him at the docks before he could escape. He didn't get a chance to warn us." A chill ran down your spine. Gaius had been your strongest link to the military, the one who understood how deep Cassian's influence truly ran. Without him, the Sub-Rosa's network was vulnerable, exposed like a wound in the heart of Rome. "We need to move," you said quietly. "Find Livia. We have to regroup before they come for the rest of us." Together, you darted through the streets toward the Temple of Saturn, the place where you'd first met the others. It was a risky choice. Such a public place could be watched, but it was also a symbol of hope and sanctuary for those fighting the shadow war beneath Rome's grand facade. As you approached, flickering torchlight spilled from the temple's arches. Figures moved quickly inside, voices low and urgent. Livia was there, tending to a young woman whose face was bruised, eyes swollen from tears. "Thank the gods you're safe," Livia whispered as she saw you. "But time is running out." Cassian's grip tightens every hour. You exchanged grim looks. The rebellion was fragile, held together by trust and secrecy. Now, with Gaius captured and Cassian's forces hunting you relentlessly, that fragile thread was unraveling fast. Suddenly, a distant horn sounded, sharp and echoing through the night. It was a call to arms, a signal that the city's enforcers were mobilizing. Cassian's shadow was no longer just a threat lurking in whispers. It was real, immediate, and closing in. You felt the weight of the dagger in your hand, a small comfort against the vast danger ahead. The fight for Rome's future was about to reach a breaking point, and there was no turning back. The horn's echo faded into the distance, but its warning lingered like smoke in the air. The city's heartbeat quickened. You could feel it, not just in your chest, but in every stone and shadow. Rome was alive with fear and defiance, both tangled tightly in the cold night. Livia pulled you aside, her hands trembling slightly as she handed you a folded piece of parchment. "This is from Gaius," she said. "He managed to slip this out before they took him. It's a list, names, locations, times. All the key players in Cashin's operation." Your fingers closed around the paper, the weight of its secrets pressing down on you. Every name was a thread in the web of corruption, a potential ally or enemy. But now, with Gaius imprisoned somewhere deep in the city's underground dungeons, you had no way to know what torture or threats he faced. "We need to move fast," Marcus said, scanning the temple entrance. "If Cashin's men are coming, they'll be here soon." You nodded, tucking the parchment into your cloak. Outside, the streets had shifted. What was once a bustling city now felt like a labyrinth of danger. Every corner might hide a soldier, every whisper a trap. As you and the others slipped out through a hidden passage behind the temple, the distant sounds of marching boots grew louder, closer. The chase was no longer a game of shadows. It was a fight for survival. You led the group toward the old aqueduct, a forgotten route known only to a few. Its arches loomed like silent sentinels in the night, a reminder of Rome's ancient power and fragility. Here, you hoped to find refuge and maybe a way to turn the tide. But the aqueduct was not just stone and water. It was a crossroads of secrets. Beneath its arches, you encountered whispers of betrayal. A messenger approached hastily, eyes darting with panic. "Cashin's men have found the safe house," he gasped. "They're closing in on Livia's family." A cold knot tightened in your stomach. The fight was no longer abstract. It was personal. With time slipping away and enemies tightening their net, every decision felt like a gamble with life itself. Would you stand and fight, risking everything to protect those you loved? Or vanish into Rome's endless maze, leaving hope to flicker in the darkness? The night stretched on, heavy with choices yet to be made, secrets yet to be revealed, and dangers yet to come. The air was thick with anticipation, every breath a reminder of what was at stake. The city's usual symphony of distant voices and clattering carts had been replaced by an eerie stillness, broken only by the occasional clink of armor or hurried footsteps echoing off the ancient stones. Rome was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash that would decide its fate. You found yourself standing near the edge of the forum, with a flickering light of torches painted long, dancing shadows across the marble columns. Around you, citizens moved quietly, some casting nervous glances over their shoulders, others clutching loved ones close, sensing the storm on the horizon even if they didn't understand its full danger. Livia's face was pale but resolute as she whispered beside you. "My family, they're hidden in the Subura district. It's crowded, chaotic, but might be our only chance to keep them safe." Marcus frowned, his eyes scanning the darkened alleys. "Cashin's men are ruthless. They won't hesitate to burn the district to flush us out." Gaius's letter burned in your pocket, a silent reminder of the names and places that bound you all together. You knew that every step forward would be met with greater peril. Yet, backing down now meant surrendering the hope of a different Rome, a city where justice wasn't just a word whispered in the shadows. As you prepared to move, the sound of distant horns cut through the night. Not one, but multiple calls, an orchestration of chaos signaling Cashin's forces closing in from all sides. It was a trap tightening like a noose. You shared a quick, determined glance with your companions. The city had changed. The battle was no longer just about survival. It was about standing for something greater than fear. With hearts pounding and the weight of Rome's future pressing down, you stepped into the darkness, ready to face whatever awaited. The city's heartbeat quickened beneath your feet. The narrow streets and crumbling arches echoed with the footsteps of Cashin's men, their armor clinking like distant thunder, relentless and unyielding. The air was thick with dust and dread, every shadow a potential threat. You tightened your grip on the dagger, feeling its cold weight as a thin thread of resolve. Livia's eyes, fierce but weary, scanned the darkened alleys ahead. "We have to reach the Subura district before they do. It's crowded, perfect for disappearing, But if they burn it, everyone we care about will be lost. Marcus shook his head, voice low. They won't hesitate. Cashin's orders are clear. No one escapes, no one interferes. They want us broken. Your thoughts raced back to Gaius, the man who had sacrificed everything to send you that list, that lifeline. His fate was unknown, buried somewhere beneath the city's cold stone walls. But his hope lived on in you and your friends. The rebellion's fragile flame was flickering, but it had not yet been snuffed. You glanced behind, seeing torches flicker through the mist, soldiers moving with deadly purpose, closing in like wolves circling their prey. Time was slipping through your fingers like grains of sand. A sudden cry pierced the night, a child's terrified wail from a nearby alley. The city's usual hum of life was replaced by a tense silence, broken only by hurried footsteps and whispered prayers. Rome was on the edge of chaos. Livia grabbed your arm, her voice a whisper. We can't lose anyone else tonight. Your heart thudded painfully as you realized the truth. This night would change everything. The fight for Rome's soul had become a desperate battle for survival, and the choices ahead would echo through history. With a final, deep breath, you plunged forward into the darkness, ready to face whatever awaited. As you and the others pushed deeper into the tangled streets of Subura, a sudden, chilling realization hit you. Someone among your own was no longer who they appeared to be. The weight of the city's shadows seemed to grow heavier, pressing closer as whispers of betrayal snaked through the narrow alleys. Just when hope felt within reach, the ground beneath you shifted in ways you never expected. Livia's eyes met yours, her usual calm replaced by a flicker of doubt. I found something, she whispered, pulling out a folded scrap of parchment from inside her cloak. The handwriting was hurried, the message short but devastating. Cashin spies have infiltrated our group. We've been walking into a trap all along. Your heart lurched. The tension that had been building, the steady pressure of Cashin's pursuit, suddenly transformed into something far more dangerous, a threat from within. The thought that one of your trusted companions might be feeding information to the enemy was a poison that could unravel everything you'd fought for. Marcus clenched his fists, jaw tight. If that's true, we have to act now, before more lives are lost. Outside, the distant horns sounded again, this time closer, more urgent. The walls of Rome seemed to close in, ancient stones whispering warnings of doom and deceit. The city was no longer just a battlefield between rebels and tyrants. It had become a maze of lies, where every step could lead to ruin. You swallowed hard, gripping the dagger tighter, knowing that the coming hours would decide not just your fate, but the fate of all Rome. The fight was far from over, and the stakes had just soared higher than ever. With betrayal in your midst and Cashin's forces closing fast, the night ahead promised no mercy, only shadows and uncertainty. The night had swallowed the city whole, and every heartbeat echoed like a drum of war. You moved carefully through the winding streets of Subura, eyes sharp, senses stretched to their limits. Betrayal hung thick in the air, but you couldn't afford to hesitate. Every second counted. Suddenly, from the shadows, a figure stepped forward. It was Cashin's spy, someone you had trusted, someone you had fought alongside. The shock hit hard, but there was no time to dwell on it. The spy lunged, dagger glinting under the torchlight. You barely dodged, feeling the rush of danger closer than ever. Livia and Marcus sprang into action. The narrow alley became a whirlwind of motion, clashing steel, shouts, and the gritty determination of those who refused to give in. You fought not just for survival, but for the future of Rome itself. In the chaos, you spotted Cashin's forces closing in, their numbers overwhelming. It was a desperate fight. But then, from the depths of the city, a sudden roar echoed. Reinforcements, unexpected allies who had taken Cashin's corruption as deeply as you had. The tide turned. Cashin himself appeared, furious and defiant. His eyes burned with rage as he faced you. You think you can stop me? He snarled. Rome is mine, but the city's heart beat stronger than his greed. Together, you, Livia, Marcus, and the others pressed forward, breaking the siege. Cashin was captured, his power stripped away like the crumbling walls around you. As the dawn broke over Rome, the city seemed to breathe again, a fragile peace born from sacrifice and courage. Yet, just as relief settled in, a message arrived, cold and cryptic. A new player, someone no one had expected, had been pulling strings even deeper than Cashin. The fight for Rome was far from over. The early morning light spilled through the cracked stone windows, casting long shadows across the forum. The city felt different now, quiet, yet uneasy, as if it too was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. Cashin's capture was a victory, but the message that arrived just hours before had unsettled everyone. It was a simple scroll, sealed with a symbol none recognized, a serpent coiled around a broken spear. The words inside were brief but chilling. You have won a battle, not the war. The real enemy watches from the shadows. Livia studied the seal, her brow furrowed. This is old. Older than any faction we've faced. Someone with power hidden in Rome's deepest secrets. Marcus's jaw tightened. If Cashin was just a pawn, who's the player? And how many others like him are out there, waiting to strike? You felt a cold shiver run down your spine. The city's walls might have been cracked, but the roots of corruption ran deeper than you imagined. The war for Rome was far from over, and this new threat was unlike anything you'd faced before. As the sun climbed higher, you gathered with your allies. Plans had to be made, alliances forged, and secrets uncovered. The city's fate depended on it. But even as you prepared, a figure watched from a distant rooftop, eyes sharp, hidden beneath a dark cloak. The game had changed, and the shadows had new masters. Rome was ready to test your courage once again. The days that followed Cashin's fall felt like a fragile pause before a storm. The city buzzed with rumors, whispers of a shadowy power, older and more cunning than any they had faced. You could see it in the eyes of the people, fear mixed with hope and a desperate hunger for truth. Livia pored over ancient texts and city records, searching for any clue about the serpent and broken spear symbol. This isn't just a gang or a faction, she said quietly. It's something tied to Rome's very foundation. A secret society hidden for centuries. Marcus paced the room, frustration gnawing at him. How do you fight an enemy you can't see? Someone who's been pulling strings long before we were born. You listened, feeling the weight of their words settle heavy on your shoulders. The fight was no longer just for survival. It was for the soul of Rome itself. One night, under the flicker of candlelight, a messenger arrived, a young woman cloaked in shadows. She carried a warning, a coded letter hinting that key leaders in the city might already be compromised. The serpent's influence had crept into the Senate, and even among the guards who once swore loyalty to Rome. Trust became a scarce commodity. Every friend, every ally, suddenly bore a question mark. And with every step deeper into this tangled web, the danger grew. You knew the next move could change everything. And somewhere, watching from the darkness, the true mastermind smiled. The dim light of dawn barely filtered through the heavy drapes as you sat across from Livia and Marcus in a small, cluttered room hidden behind an old bookshop. The walls were lined with dusty scrolls and crumbling manuscripts. Rome's forgotten history waiting to be uncovered. The serpent and broken spear symbol lingered in your mind like a dark omen. Livia unfolded the latest scroll she had found, tracing the strange insignia with her finger. The Serpens, the Black Serpent, was an ancient secret society. They once controlled Rome's most powerful decisions, operating from the shadows to shape the Republic's fate. Marcus scoffed, rubbing his tired eyes. Sounds like a story to scare children. It's more than that, Livia insisted, voice low. Records show they disappeared centuries ago, but there are hints they never truly left. Their reach could be why Cashin had so much influence. He was a puppet, maybe even a high-ranking member. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling like a shroud. You felt your throat tighten. If this secret society had infiltrated the highest ranks, how many trusted faces were really enemies? How many whispered betrayals hid behind smiles? Marcus slammed a fist on the table. We can't just sit here talking. We need proof. Allies. Something real. Livia nodded. I found a place. An old underground chamber beneath the Senate. Some believe it was a meeting place for the Serpens If we can find it, maybe we can find their secrets, maybe even expose them. The idea sent a ripple of both hope and fear through you. To confront a shadow so ancient and deep meant risking everything. But standing still was not an option. That night, under the cover of darkness, you and your closest allies slipped through narrow alleys and hidden passages. The city was eerily quiet, the usual bustle replaced by a tense stillness that pressed against your skin like cold stone. Every step forward was a step into unknown dangers. Livia led the way, her lantern casting flickering light on cracked mosaics and faded frescoes. The entrance to the chamber was concealed beneath a loose stone in the Senate's courtyard, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. As the heavy door creaked open, a musty, cold air greeted you. The chamber was vast, the walls carved with serpents entwining broken spears, the symbol you had come to fear. Torches flickered in sconces, casting long, twisting shadows. Suddenly, Marcus froze. Look, he whispered, pointing at a wall covered in faded writing. Livia stepped forward, tracing the inscriptions with her fingers. It's a list names, dates. Some of these are senators, generals, even priests. People who vanished mysteriously. Your heart hammered. The Serpens was real and still active. A sudden noise startled you all. Footsteps, close, deliberate, echoing down the stone corridors. Someone knew you were here. Hi, Livia hissed. You scrambled behind a pillar as shadows loomed, and figures in dark cloaks appeared, their faces hidden beneath heavy hoods. One step forward, voice cold and smooth. You shouldn't have come here. The figure's presence was commanding, dangerous. Your mind raced. Were these guards of the society? Enforcers of a secret order that would kill to keep their truth hidden? You swallowed fear, stepping into the flickering torchlight. We know what you are. Rome deserves to know. A cruel smile crept beneath the hood. Rome is ours, and those who threaten us become part of the darkness. The chamber plunged into chaos. You fought fiercely, but their numbers were many, their skill deadly. Amid the clash, you caught sight of a familiar face, someone you had never suspected, a trusted senator, now revealed as a member of the Serpens. The betrayal cut deep. Wounded but unbroken, you and your friends managed to escape into the labyrinth beneath Rome. Bloodied and breathless, you knew the truth you carried was a spark, one that could ignite rebellion or doom you all. Back above ground, the city was awakening. The sun rose on a Rome that was both ancient and new, its streets filled with people unaware of the shadows crawling beneath their feet. You stood with Livia and Marcus, eyes fixed on the horizon. We have proof, Livia said, voice steady despite the exhaustion. But the Serpens is stronger than we feared. They're everywhere. Marcus clenched his jaw. Then we have to be smarter, faster. If they control the Senate, the guards, even the priests, how do we fight an enemy with no face? You looked to your friends, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. This wasn't just a battle for Rome's streets. It was a war for its very soul, and the city's fate depended on you. The days that followed were some of the hardest you had ever faced. Rome was no longer just a city to walk through. It had become a maze of shadows, lies, and whispered threats. Every corner held the possibility of betrayal, and every friendly face might hide a dagger. Livia pored over the ancient scrolls and the notes from the chamber, piecing together a tangled history of the Serpens. Their influence stretched far and wide, woven into the fabric of Rome's power. But it wasn't just their reach that unsettled you. It was their patience. They had survived centuries, waiting silently for the right moment to strike. Marcus was restless. His usual confidence was tempered by a grim awareness that every move could be a trap. We need allies, he said one evening, pacing the small room where you gathered. People outside the Senate, outside the city, even farmers, merchants, soldiers who still believe in Rome's true honor. Livia nodded slowly. And we need to protect ourselves. The society has spies everywhere. We can't trust anyone blindly. You felt the weight of their words sinking in. Trust had become a rare currency, and every decision carried consequences that could cost lives. One night, as you sat alone in a quiet corner of the city, your thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock. It was Marcus, his face drawn and tired but determined. "I found someone who might help," he said. "A soldier named Gaius. He's known for his loyalty to Rome, and he hates corruption as much as we do." The next day, you met Gaius outside the city walls. His presence was calm but fierce, eyes sharp with the experience of countless battles. He listened carefully as you explained the threat of the serpens nodding slowly. "I've seen signs," he said quietly. "Strange orders, secret meetings among some officers. It's like a poison spreading in the heart of the city." With Gaius on your side, you felt a flicker of hope. But the danger was far from over. Back in the city, Livia received a message, anonymous but chilling. "Stop digging, or Rome will bury you." The warning was clear. The society knew you were close. Fear pressed against your chest like heavy stones, but giving up wasn't an option. Late one evening, you gathered with your small group to plan the next steps. Livia spread maps and notes across the table. "There's a hidden vault beneath the Temple of Janus," she said. "It might hold documents or artifacts that could expose the society completely." Marcus's voice was tense. "Getting there won't be easy. The temple is guarded, and the society's influence inside the religious orders runs deep." You looked around at your friends, tired but resolute. "Then we go carefully. We move as one. We can't let fear stop us." The night of the mission arrived. Cloaked by darkness, you slipped through the narrow streets, hearts pounding with every step. The Temple of Janus loomed ahead, its ancient columns bathed in moonlight. Inside, the silence was thick, broken only by the soft echo of footsteps and whispered prayers. You found the hidden entrance, a small, almost invisible trapdoor beneath a loose tile. As you descended into the cold vault, the air grew heavier, charged with the weight of centuries of secrets. Shelves lined with scrolls, dusty artifacts, and rusted relics surrounded you. Livia hurried to a large chest, prying it open to reveal bundles of documents. "This is it," she whispered, scanning the fragile papers. "Proof of meetings, bribes, even murders, all connected to the serpens. Suddenly, a shadow flickered at the entrance. You froze. A voice hissed. "Thought you could sneak in unnoticed?" A figure stepped forward, cloak pulled back to reveal a familiar face, a priest you once trusted. His eyes were cold, and in his hand gleamed a dagger. The fight was swift and desperate. You barely escaped, clutching the stolen documents as the temple's alarms began to echo through the stone halls. Back in your safe house, the tension was thick. The priest's betrayal stung more than the wounds you nursed. Livia spread out the documents, revealing names and dates that confirmed the society's reach into Rome's highest offices. But with every page turned, the picture grew darker. You realized that the Serpens wasn't just a secret society. They were a force determined to control Rome's future, no matter the cost. That night, as the city slept unaware, you sat by a flickering candle, the weight of the coming battle pressing down. Marcus broke the silence. "They want Rome to fall, but we're going to fight. We're going to expose the truth." You looked around at your friends, worn but unbroken. The fight for Rome's soul was just beginning. The city never truly slept, but in those quiet hours before dawn, the weight of what lay ahead felt almost unbearable. The stolen documents lay spread across the table, their fragile edges whispering stories of betrayal and ambition that stretched far beyond anything you had imagined. Each name you read tied a knot tighter around Rome's throat. Senators, priests, generals, even merchants who bowed their heads to unseen masters. Livia's eyes were red from hours of reading. She looked up, exhaustion etched in every line on her face. "This goes deeper than we thought," she said softly. "The Serpens has agents everywhere. Even those closest to us could be compromised. Marcus rubbed his jaw, pacing. We need to figure out who we can trust. We can't act blindly. If they know we have these documents, they'll come after us with everything they've got. Gaius leaned forward, voice low and steady. We should prepare for the worst. This isn't just about exposing corruption anymore. It's about survival, ours and Rome's. The gravity of his words settled over the room like a thick fog. You knew he was right. The society's tendrils were venomous, and you had already seen the lengths they would go to protect their secrets. Over the next few days, you set about fortifying your small circle. Trusted allies were few, but those who joined brought skills you desperately needed: stealth, knowledge of the city's underbelly, and, most importantly, courage. Rome itself seemed to pulse with unease, as if sensing the storm gathering just beyond its walls. One afternoon, while walking through the bustling forum, you noticed strange glances exchanged between groups of men dressed in plain clothes, but moving with the precision of soldiers. Their eyes scanned the crowds, lingering a little too long on familiar faces. You caught one man's gaze, and he smiled, a cold, calculating smile that sent a chill through your spine. It was a silent warning. The hunt was on. That evening, you gathered in a secluded room beneath a tavern, the flickering torchlight casting long shadows on the stone walls. Livia laid out the plan. We're going to take these documents to the consul. If anyone can bring justice, it's him. But we have to be careful. The Serpens Ater controls much of the Senate. Marcus nodded grimly. We'll need a distraction to draw their eyes away. Something big, something that shakes the city's foundations. Gaius spoke up. There's unrest in the outskirts, food shortages, rising prices. If we stoke that fire just enough, the city might be too distracted to focus on us. You agreed. The idea of using Rome's simmering tensions as cover felt risky, but it was the only way forward. The city was a powder keg, and you had just found the spark. As plans were set, the personal cost began to show. Sleepless nights, whispered warnings, and close calls tested the bonds between you all. Trust was both your shield and your weakness. One morning, news arrived that shook you to the core. A close ally had vanished. No messages, no traces, only the faintest hint that the Serpens Ater had marked them. Fear clawed at your heart. If they could reach your friends, no one was safe. Determined not to let terror dictate your actions, you pressed forward. The day of the distraction arrived, and the city erupted into chaos. Protests flared in the streets, voices raised in anger and desperation. Smoke curled from overturned carts and shattered windows. In the confusion, Marcus and Gaius slipped away toward the Senate, documents hidden beneath their cloaks. Meanwhile, Livia and you moved through back alleys and secret passages, watching for shadows that might spell danger. Hours passed like a lifetime. The tension was a living thing, twisting your stomach and sharpening every sense. Then, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus returned alone. Gaius, his voice faltered. You felt the world tilt. What happened? Marcus's eyes were dark pools of grief. He was caught. The guards knew too much. They dragged him away before I could intervene. The loss was raw, a wound that throbbed with every breath. Gaius had been more than a soldier. He was a symbol of hope in a city drowning in deceit. Livia's hand found Marcus's shoulder. We carry on. For Gaius. But the Serpens Ater was tightening its grip. Whispers reached your ears. Rumors of secret trials, disappearances, and executions that no one dared speak of openly. The city's light was flickering, and the darkness threatened to swallow it whole. In the days that followed, you found yourself haunted by dreams, shadowy figures lurking just out of sight, voices calling your name in the dead of night. The pressure was crushing, but the fire inside you refused to die. One evening, as you reviewed the stolen documents once more, a single detail caught your eye, a coded message hidden within the margins of a letter. It hinted at a meeting place, a gathering of the Serpens Ater's inner circle. This was your chance to confront the serpent's heart. The decision was unanimous. You would attend the meeting in disguise, risking everything to learn the truth. The city's fate, and perhaps your own, depended on it. As you prepared, The weight of what lay ahead settled deep in your bones. This was no longer just a fight for justice. It was a battle for survival, for the soul of Rome itself. The night of the meeting was moonless, the streets slick with rain. Cloaked and silent, you moved through the shadows toward the appointed place, a forgotten villa on the city's edge, where the powerful met behind locked doors and guarded secrets. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and whispered schemes. Faces, masked and wary, flicked toward you as you entered. The Serpens Aether's leaders sat around a heavy table, their eyes gleaming with cold amusement. You forced your heart to steady, every muscle tense, every breath shallow. The moment had come. The Serpent's den was laid bare, and the battle for Rome's future was about to be decided. But just as you were about to speak, the villa's doors burst open. Armed men flooded in, and a voice boomed through the room. Enough games. The Serpens Aether ends tonight. The sudden crash of the villa doors echoed like thunder through the heavy air. Torches flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows that danced on the ancient walls, revealing startled faces behind masks. The room that once breathed with quiet menace now roared with chaos. You barely had a moment to steady your breath before armed men poured inside. Roman soldiers, their armor gleaming dimly under the flickering torchlight. Their leader, a tall figure cloaked in the crimson of the Praetorian Guard, stepped forward with a commanding presence. Enough games. The Serpens Aether ends tonight. His voice rang, sharp and unyielding. Gasps and hurried whispers rippled through the masked faces around the table. The Serpens Aether had been shrouded in secrecy for so long that few believed it could be brought down. But here, in this hidden villa on the city's edge, that belief shattered like fragile glass. You felt your heart hammer against your ribs, adrenaline surging through your veins. This was the moment when years of fear and planning collided. The secrets you risked your life to uncover were finally about to be exposed. Livia's hand gripped your arm tightly. Her eyes searched yours, silently asking, "Are you ready?" Before you could respond, a voice slithered through the chaos. A voice cold and calm, unmistakably familiar. "Do you truly believe you can stop us so easily?" The room's eldest figure rose from his seat, his mask slipping to reveal sharp, unforgiving features. Rome was built on power, and power will not be stolen by fools. The tension cracked the room like lightning. Members of the Serpens Aether moved swiftly, some reaching beneath their robes for concealed weapons. The soldiers tightened their grip on their swords and shields, prepared for bloodshed. You ducked behind a column, heart pounding, watching as the fragile peace shattered. Steel clashed, shouts erupted, and the villa became a battleground. Through the chaos, Marcus fought like a man possessed. His sword flashed with deadly precision, deflecting blows from a masked attacker. Livia moved with surprising grace, using agility over brute strength, dodging strikes and countering with swift, calculated hits. You stayed close to the edge, eyes scanning for the leader of the Serpens Aether. The old man who had spoken was nowhere to be found amid the turmoil. Instead, the shadows seemed to swallow him. Suddenly, a scream cut through the clamor. You turned toward the sound and saw Gaius, alive, but shackled and dragged into the room by two guards. His face was bruised, eyes blazing with defiance despite his bonds. "Gaius," you shouted, but the noise swallowed your voice. The Praetorian captain stepped forward, releasing Gaius from the guards and pulling him to his feet. "You're free," the captain said solemnly. "Your courage gave us the lead we needed." Relief flooded through you, but it was tempered by the grim reality around you. The fight was far from over. Amid the turmoil, you noticed a figure slipping away, masked and nimble. The leader. You pushed forward, weaving through combatants, heart racing. Catching him was your only chance to end this. The chase was a blur. Narrow corridors, twisting staircases, the villa's labyrinthine design worked both for and against you. You could hear the distant clash of swords behind you, but focused on the figure slipping through the shadows. Suddenly, the figure stopped in a dimly lit chamber. You cornered him against the cold stone wall. You can't run from what's coming, you said, voice steady despite the pounding in your chest. He smiled, a thin, cruel smile that didn't reach his eyes. Rome is not yours to save. Before you could react, he pulled a small, ornate dagger from beneath his cloak. The blade gleamed in the faint light, a symbol of ancient rituals long buried. Your instincts kicked in. You grabbed the dagger, wrestling with the man. The fight was brief but fierce. In the struggle, the blade grazed your arm, burning like fire. With a final shove, you pinned him against the wall, breathing hard. His eyes locked onto yours, a mixture of hatred and admiration. You don't understand the forces you're meddling with, he whispered. This city is a living beast, and some wounds cannot heal. The words chilled you. What had you truly stepped into? The Serpenzater was more than a corrupt society. It was something ancient, tangled in the roots of Rome itself. Before you could respond, the sounds of battle drew closer. Reinforcements from the Praetorian Guard poured into the chamber, surrounding the captive. The man sneered but offered no resistance. As he was taken away, you looked down at your bleeding arm, the sting fading into numbness. The fight had cost more than you realized. Back in the main hall, the tide had turned. The Praetorian Guard had gained the upper hand, rounding up remaining members of the Serpenzater. Chains clinked and curses fell as the secret society's grip on the city weakened. Livia approached you, concern in her eyes. We did it. The city will finally breathe. But even as those words left her lips, a creeping doubt settled over you. This victory felt hollow, incomplete. The old man's warning echoed in your mind. Some wounds cannot heal. As dawn broke over Rome, the streets were silent, but the city was far from safe. The Serpenzater's leaders were captured, but what of their influence? The poison they spread into the veins of Rome could survive even the harshest purge. You returned to your small circle, faces weary but resolute. We have a chance now, Marcus said quietly. To rebuild, to cleanse. But the shadow of uncertainty lingered. What secrets remained buried? How many hands in Rome's government still moved in the dark, shielding corruption and deceit? And then a final twist, one that would shake your resolve to its core. A messenger arrived, breathless, clutching a sealed scroll stamped with the insignia of the consul himself. The seal was broken carefully, and as you read the message aloud, your voice trembled. The consul has been assassinated. Silence fell over the room. The city's fragile hope shattered like glass. The Serpenzater might have lost their leaders, but Rome's true battle was only just beginning. The weight of the news settled over you like a suffocating fog. The consul, the man who was meant to guide Rome through its darkest hour, was gone, assassinated in the heart of the city. The message, so stark and final, left no room for hope. The fragile victory you and your allies had fought for now seemed like a cruel illusion. The room was silent, save for the soft crackling of the torch flames. Faces turned pale, eyes darting nervously. You could see it in their expressions, the realization that this was no random act of violence. This was a message, a declaration from the shadows that Rome's power struggles were far from over. Marcus broke the silence. This changes everything. The consul's death will ignite chaos. Factions will rise, and the city will tear itself apart. Livia nodded slowly, her usual resolve shaken. The Serpenzater may be weakened, but whoever struck the consul has roots deep in the Senate, maybe even deeper. Your mind raced, trying to grasp the implications. The consul had been the last barrier against corruption, the thin line holding back the darkness that threatened to consume Rome. Without him, the city's fate was uncertain. The message had come with a name, an ominous clue hinting at the assassin's identity, a shadow known only as the Raven, whispered about in hushed conversations but never seen. Rumors painted the Raven as a master of stealth, a ghost capable of turning the wheels of power from behind the scenes. Your group knew that chasing shadows was dangerous. But if you wanted to save Rome, you had no choice but to hunt the Raven. Days passed in a blur of tension. The city was restless. Markets emptied earlier than usual. Soldiers doubled their patrols. Whispers of rebellion and treachery filled every corner. The Senate convened hastily, but instead of unity, it splintered into factions, each accusing the other of complicity. You and your allies moved carefully through the city, gathering information. Livia met with contacts in the forum, listening for rumors. Marcus reached out to old friends in the Praetorian Guard, seeking loyalty among soldiers. You walked the streets, feeling the eyes of strangers on your back, knowing that trust was scarce and danger lurked in every shadow. One evening, under the dim glow of a flickering street lamp, Livia pulled you aside. Her face was grim. "There's been another attack," she whispered. "This time on the Tribune." They barely escaped. The Tribune was a respected official, one who had spoken openly against corruption. The attempt on his life confirmed what you feared. The Raven was orchestrating a campaign of terror designed to cripple Rome's leaders one by one. You knew that the assassin's plan was more than just eliminating enemies. It was about sending a message that no one was safe. Marcus joined you, his jaw clenched. "If we don't act soon, the city will fall into anarchy." Plans began to form. Your group decided to split up, each taking a vital task. Livia would infiltrate the Senate, posing as an advisor to gather intel on suspicious alliances. Marcus would strengthen ties with loyal soldiers, preparing for a possible uprising. You, tasked with tracking the Raven's movements, would dive into the city's underworld, the maze of alleys, taverns, and secret meeting places where shadows whispered secrets. The underworld was a realm of danger and deception. The people there owed loyalty only to gold and survival. You moved carefully, exchanging coded words with informants, piecing together fragments of the Raven's network. One night, in a cramped tavern filled with smoke and the murmur of voices, a weary informant slid a folded parchment across the table to you. "Here," he said softly. "It's a list of names, those marked for death. The Raven's hit list." Your eyes scanned the names, prominent senators, influential merchants, even some military commanders. The reach of this assassin was wider than you imagined. The conspiracy wasn't just political, it was personal, reaching into every corner of Roman society. Fear gnawed at you, but you pushed it aside. You had to act. Meanwhile, Livia reported back with troubling news. The Senate was fractured, with some senators secretly supporting the assassin's cause, motivated by greed or revenge. The consul's death had unleashed a wave of ambition and fear. Marcus found growing unrest among the troops. Some soldiers questioned their loyalties, uncertain who truly commanded Rome's future. As your group gathered to share what you had learned, the city seemed to hold its breath. The looming threat of the Raven grew, and time was running out. Then, a new development struck like a thunderclap. An urgent message arrived, Livia's voice trembling on the other end of the line. "They've captured one of us. Gaius." The Serpen's remnants found him. Your heart sank. Gaius had been a vital part of your group, courageous and resourceful. If the Serpens held him, they might force him to betray you. Plans shifted instantly. Rescuing Gaius became a priority, but you knew it would be dangerous. The villa where he was held was heavily guarded, and the risk of walking into a trap was high. You prepared carefully, gathering weapons, allies, and information. Livia's intelligence helped identify weak points in the villa's defenses. Marcus coordinated a small team of loyal soldiers to assist. The night of the rescue mission was dark and silent, the streets eerily empty as you approached the villa. The city's tension hung thick, as if even the air was aware that something decisive was about to happen. You moved through the shadows, heart pounding, every sound amplified in the stillness. The villa loomed ahead, a fortress of stone and iron, its walls a barrier against the light of hope. Inside, Gaius was held in a dim chamber, bound but alive. His eyes widened with relief when you appeared. "We have to move fast," you whispered. "The Serpens won't wait." The escape was tense. Guards patrolled hallways, voices echoed nearby, and the risk of discovery was constant. But your team moved with precision, driven by desperation and determination. Just as you reached the outer gates, Alarms blared. A trap. Soldiers poured in from every direction. You fought fiercely, every second dragging on as the walls closed in. In the chaos, Gaius was struck down. The pain of seeing him fall ignited a fierce fury within you. You pushed forward, breaking through the guards and dragging him to safety. Outside, the city streets welcomed you with cold silence. You carried Gaius away from the villa, breaths ragged, hearts heavy. The rescue had succeeded, but the cost was clear. Gaius was gravely wounded, and the Serpensater was more dangerous than ever. As dawn began to break, the city's fate balanced on a knife's edge. The consul's death had unleashed a storm, and the Raven's shadow still stretched long and cold. Your group knew the battle was far from over. The fight to save Rome would demand more than courage. It would require sacrifice, trust, and a willingness to face the darkness within. And somewhere, deep in the city's heart, the Raven watched and waited, ready to strike again. The early morning light filtered through the narrow streets, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch out like fingers, reaching for the remnants of hope you clung to. Gaius lay on a crude cot in a safe house, pale and weak, but alive. His breathing was shallow, and the wound on his side oozed dark blood. The weight of what had happened pressed heavily on everyone. Livia sat beside him, her face etched with worry. "He's stable for now," she said softly, "but he needs rest and protection." Marcus paced the room, his usual confidence shaken. "The Serpensater won't stop. They know what we're planning. If they have Gaius, even briefly, they might have learned more than we want." You nodded, heart pounding. The rescue had saved a life but exposed more vulnerabilities. The Serpensater was relentless, and every move you made seemed to lead deeper into their web. Outside the safe house, Rome was waking, but the city felt different, tense, uncertain, almost holding its breath. The Senate's divisions had grown, with factions openly accusing one another. Markets buzzed with rumors of rebellion. Even the streets were no longer safe. Shadows lengthened, and unseen eyes followed every step. You gathered with your allies in a small back room, the air thick with urgency. The plans you had laid earlier now felt fragile, brittle against the mounting storm. "We need to strike back," you said, voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "The Raven is trying to break Rome's spirit. If we don't act, this city will fall into chaos." Livia's eyes met yours. "But how? We don't even know who the Raven is, or where they'll strike next." Marcus rubbed his temples. "We need to force their hand, draw them out." A heavy silence fell. The risks were clear. To challenge the Raven openly meant inviting danger, perhaps even death. But inaction was a slow surrender. That night, you walked the city streets again, this time with a different purpose. You were no longer just chasing shadows. You were hunting a ghost. The taverns and alleys where whispers traveled fast now held a sharper edge. Every conversation was a puzzle piece, every glance a possible clue. You met with informants who offered scraps of information. A secret meeting rumored to happen near the forum, strange movements near the river, unexplained disappearances among the city's merchants. One contact, a street vendor named Sabina, leaned in close and whispered, "They say the Raven isn't just one person. It's a network, a poison that's spread too deep." Her words chilled you. If the Raven was not a lone assassin, but a conspiracy threading through Rome's highest ranks, the fight would be far more dangerous and complicated. Back at the safe house, tension simmered among your group. Gaius's injury left a gap, and suspicion began to creep in. Trust, once solid, now wavered. One evening, as Livia pored over a map of Rome, tracing possible routes for the Raven's network, Marcus confronted you quietly. "Do you think one of us could be a traitor?" he asked, voice low. You considered the question carefully. In times of fear, suspicion was natural, but betrayal within your own ranks would be devastating. "I don't know," you admitted, "but we can't afford to turn on each other." That night, sleep came fitfully, haunted by visions of the city tearing itself apart. The stakes were higher than ever. Rome was a powder keg, and the spark could come from anywhere. The next days passed in a blur of meetings, scouting missions, and whispered warnings. The Senate's debates grew louder and more fractured, some senators openly calling for harsh measures against suspected conspirators, others warning against rash action that could tear Rome apart. Then a new threat emerged. Word reached you that a trusted merchant, one who supplied food and goods to much of the city, had vanished. His warehouses were found empty, goods missing, and his family in hiding. This was no ordinary disappearance. It hinted at a plan to starve the city, to weaken its people so that fear and desperation would rule. You realized that the Ravens' campaign was shifting. No longer just targeted killings, but a siege on Rome's very lifeblood. The city's mood darkened further. Hunger and fear spread alongside rumors of uprisings in the poorer districts. Soldiers loyal to different factions clashed in the streets, and the line between friend and foe blurred. In the midst of this chaos, Livia uncovered a cryptic message hidden in the tribune's notes, a clue left behind before his escape attempt. The message hinted at a secret meeting place, an abandoned temple on the outskirts of Rome, where the Ravens' network might be gathering. The opportunity was clear, but the danger was immense. To confront the Raven, there could expose the heart of the conspiracy, but it could also be a trap. Your group debated long into the night. Some feared it was too risky. Others believed it was the only way forward. In the end, determination won. You prepared to face the darkness directly, ready to step into the unknown. The journey to the abandoned temple was tense. The roads were quieter than usual, as if the city itself was holding its breath. As you neared the ruins, the air grew heavy with the scent of decay and forgotten power. Inside, the temple was a labyrinth of crumbling stone and shadow. Every step echoed like a heartbeat in the silence. Suddenly, figures emerged from the darkness, masked, armed, shadows within shadows. The ambush was swift and brutal. Your group fought desperately, but the attackers were skilled, prepared. In the chaos, a figure stepped forward, tall, cloaked, voice cold as ice. "I am the Raven," the figure declared. "Rome is rotten, and I am its cure." The confrontation sent shockwaves through you. The assassin was not a mere killer, but a zealot, convinced that destruction was necessary for rebirth. But before you could respond, the temple walls shook. Explosions rocked the chamber, dust and debris filling the air. It was a diversion. More enemies closed in. The fight became a desperate struggle for survival. Your group pushed to the edge. As you retreated, dragging the wounded with you, the figure's words echoed. "This city will fall, and from its ashes a new Rome will rise." Outside, the temple burned, a symbol of a battle that was far from over. The city awaited its fate, poised between collapse and hope. Your group knew this was just the beginning. The sky above Rome had darkened by the time you and your group stumbled out from the ruins of the burning temple. The acrid smell of smoke clung to your clothes, and the taste of dust filled your mouth. The narrow roads that had once been filled with the chatter of everyday life were now eerily silent, as if the city itself recoiled from the violence that had just unfolded. Your heart pounded, adrenaline still coursing through your veins, but beneath it all lay a deep weariness. The confrontation with the Raven, the revelation that this shadowy figure was more than just an assassin, but a fanatic willing to burn the city to the ground to remake it, had shaken you to your core. Livius supported Gaius, who had barely managed to crawl out of the temple with you. His wound had worsened, and his breaths came shallow and ragged. Despite the urgency, none of you dared to speak much. Words felt too heavy, too raw. Marcus broke the silence, voice grim. "They knew exactly where we would be. This was a trap." You nodded slowly, already piecing together the implications. The Raven wasn't just a lone predator. They had eyes everywhere, allies hiding in Rome's darkest corners. The network was far more extensive than you had feared. "The Senate," you muttered. "There has to be a leak. Someone high up is feeding them information." The idea made your skin crawl. Rome was already fractured with political tension, and now treachery ran like poison through its veins. Back in the safety of the small, hidden house you call the base. You and your companions gathered to regroup. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows on tired faces. "We can't fight this alone," Livia said, exhaustion softening her voice. "We need allies, friends who still believe in Rome, who want to save it, not see it burn." Gaius looked up weakly, pain flickering in his eyes. "But who can we trust? When even the senators turn against each other, it's hard to know who stands with us and who stands with the Raven." You swallowed hard. The city's walls were closing in. Every step forward seemed to deepen the shadows around you. Night passed slowly, each hour stretching longer than the last. Sleep was fleeting. Your mind raced with plans and fears. Every noise outside made you flinch. Rome was no longer the familiar city of your youth. It was a place where survival was uncertain, where betrayal lurked behind every corner. The next morning brought grim news. Reports flooded in of uprisings in the poorer districts, the Subura and Trastevere, where desperation had finally boiled over. Food shortages, caused in part by the missing merchants' warehouses, had left many hungry and angry. Soldiers loyal to rival factions clashed openly in the streets, and the city's once glorious temples and markets now bore the scars of unrest. Fires smoldered in several neighborhoods. You understood now that the Ravens' campaign was working. The city was fracturing, and the people's trust in their leaders was shattering. The Senate had called an emergency session, but the speeches were bitter and fractured, with accusations flying like daggers. No resolution was in sight. You met again with your small circle of trusted allies. The burden felt heavier than ever. Marcus, pacing back and forth, spoke sharply. "We have to act. If we let the Senate tear itself apart, the Raven will have the city's heart." "But how?" Livia asked, eyes heavy. "They won't listen. They're too busy fighting among themselves." You thought of the merchants, the soldiers, the common people caught in the crossfire. The city was a powder keg. You needed a spark, but one that wouldn't ignite the entire city into chaos. There was a knock at the door, soft but urgent. You exchanged wary glances before opening it. A young man slipped inside quickly, breathless. He was a courier you had met before, a messenger known for his discretion. "You're not safe here," he said hurriedly. "The Serpenzatare have stepped up their hunt. They're sweeping through neighborhoods, looking for you." Your stomach clenched. The Serpenzatare was the deadly enforcer group working for the Raven, feared across Rome for their ruthlessness. "And there's more," the courier added. "There's a new name being whispered in the streets, a senator who is openly aligned with the Raven. His name is Claudius Vero." The name sent a chill through you. Claudius Vero was one of the most powerful men in Rome, known for his ruthless ambition. "Why now?" Marcus demanded. "Why reveal a senator's name?" The courier shook his head. "Because not everyone is willing to stay silent. There are others in the Senate who want to stop the madness. They want proof." Your mind raced. If Vero was the Raven's ally in the Senate, the conspiracy reached deeper than you'd imagined. But if there were senators willing to fight back, perhaps there was still hope. The weeks that followed were a blur of secret meetings, whispered alliances, and narrow escapes. Your group worked tirelessly to gather evidence against Vero, piecing together clues from informants, intercepted messages, and clandestine observations. But with every victory came a setback. The city's unrest worsened. The Serpenzatare tightened its grip, striking fear into the hearts of those who dared oppose the Raven. One evening, as you reviewed a collection of coded letters, Livia's face suddenly paled. "There's a message here," she said quietly. "It's a warning for us." You read the words, chilling in their simplicity. "Stop digging, or lose everything you hold dear." The threat was clear. The Raven knew you were close. That night, sleep was impossible. You lay awake, the weight of the city pressing down on you. The fight was no longer just about saving Rome. It was about survival, yours, and everyone who still believed in a future free from fear. The next morning, Gaius's condition worsened. The wound had become infected, and despite your best efforts, his strength was fading. Livia sat by his side, her hand clasped tightly around his. "Stay with us," Gaius she whispered. We need you. He opened his eyes briefly, a faint smile flickering. For Rome, he said. It was a rallying cry, a reminder of why you all fought. But the fragile hope in the room was shadowed by the knowledge that your time was running out. The Senate was about to convene again. This time, it was rumored that a vote to expose Claudius Vero's treachery was on the table. But with power so deeply entrenched, the outcome was far from certain. You and your allies prepared to make your final move. Evidence in hand, you planned to present the truth to the Senate, to shine a light into the darkness. But the Raven was watching. On the day of the vote, the Senate chamber buzzed with tension. Senators whispered in tight clusters, eyes darting suspiciously. You slipped into the gallery, heart pounding. This was your moment. As the debate began, accusations flew. Vero denied everything, painting himself as a victim of political scheming. Then, one of Vero's closest allies, a senator named Marcellus, stepped forward with a dagger hidden beneath his toga. In a sudden, violent motion, he lunged toward the speaker's podium. Chaos erupted. Shouts filled the chamber. Senators scrambled for cover. You saw Marcus leap toward Marcellus, wrestling the dagger away. But in the confusion, Marcellus pulled a hidden vial from his sleeve and smashed it on the floor. A strange smoke filled the chamber, thick and choking. People gasped and collapsed, clutching their throats. You felt yourself weakening, vision blurring. The last thing you saw before darkness took you was Vero standing calmly amidst the chaos, a cruel smile playing on his lips. When you awoke, you were alone and disoriented. The Senate chamber was eerily silent. The city's fate, and your own, hung in the balance. You blinked against the blur, your head pounding like a drum. The air still smelled faintly of smoke and something bitter. Whatever gas had filled the chamber was potent, but it had dispersed. You pulled yourself up slowly, your arms trembling. The Senate hall was a mess. The floor was littered with collapsed chairs, overturned scrolls, and scattered sandals. The silence was louder than any riot, thick with dread and unanswered questions. Outside, Rome was no better. As you stumbled into the street, you found the forum nearly deserted. A lone merchant pushed a wheelbarrow of spoiled grapes. A stray dog barked and then disappeared into an alley. The people had gone to ground, again. Rumors were probably already swirling. Assassination attempts, poison in the Senate, whispers of a shadow government. But you knew the truth, and it tasted worse than anything left rotting under the Roman sun. You wandered, disoriented, until a soft whistle from a shadowed corridor pulled you from your haze. A familiar face leaned out, a young rebel courier named Aulus, his face pale and worried. By the gods, you're alive, he breathed, pulling you inside. We thought you were dead. I'm close, you muttered, and he cracked a sad smile. They took Marcus, Aulus said, eyes sharp now, dragged him out during the confusion. And Vero, he walked away untouched. That hit you harder than any fall. Marcus had been your right hand, steady, relentless, unshakable. You thought him lying in some cell now, bruised and bloodied. Or worse. And Vero, the face of the Raven's political front, was still sitting comfortably in his villa, planning whatever came next. You knew what came next. Rome would fall, quietly, not with earthquakes or fire, but with silence, as people stopped believing things could get better. Not yet, you thought. Not while you were still breathing. You returned to the safe house that night and found Livia holding Gaius's hand, tears slipping down her cheek. His breathing was shallow, but he was alive. She looked up when she saw you, face stunned, and then she embraced you tightly, as if afraid you were a ghost. We're not giving up, you said, voice rough with dust and determination. We still have enough to bury Vero, but we need to act fast. Livia nodded. The streets are on fire. The people want justice, but they don't know who to follow. You did. With what strength Gaius had left, he gave you the names of remaining allies, senators, scribes, even a former gladiator with a voice loud enough to reach the crowds. People Vero hadn't bought or broken. You and Livia split up to reach them. It was dangerous. Every step outside felt like threading a needle in a sandstorm. But within days, You had a network forming again. Bare bones, fragile, but full of purpose. One night, in the ruins of an old amphitheater, you gathered the new resistance. 40 people, maybe 50, not an army, but something stronger than numbers. Hope. You told them what you'd learned. About the Raven, about the alliance between Vero and the Serpents Ater, and about the plan to burn what remained of Rome's order. They want chaos, you said. They want the people scared, angry, fighting each other instead of fighting back. But we're still here, Livia added, her voice steady. And that means Rome isn't lost yet. There was silence, then the quiet murmur of agreement, spreading like a ripple across still water. You struck first. That week, a cache of stolen food was returned to the starving neighborhoods of Trastevere, with a message burned into the crates. You are not forgotten. The people noticed. 2 days later, a list of Vero's backroom deals was leaked and posted across the forum, nailed to temple doors and market stalls. The people read. They whispered. They grew angry. And then came the final spark. You learned that Vero was preparing to declare himself Praetor Maximus, using the Senate chaos as a reason to seize temporary power for the sake of stability. You'd seen enough temporary tyrants to know how that story ended. But the night before the vote, you found something in one of Gaius's hidden caches, a document with Vero's seal, detailing a secret pact to disband the Senate and install martial law. It was the smoking scroll. You stood atop the rostra that dawn, facing the weary crowd gathering in the forum. Your voice was raw, but it cut through the morning air like a blade. This is the truth, you said, holding up the document. Claudius Vero is not saving Rome. He is selling it. The people listened. He is the Raven's voice in the Senate. He has fed on your fear, poisoned your food, burned your homes, and now he wants your loyalty. The crowd murmured. Some shouted. Some wept. Then Livia stepped forward. You are not powerless. Rome belongs to you. It began slowly. One man threw down his Vero-stamped bread ration. Then another tore off a sash bearing the crest of his house. A woman raised a torch. The people moved, not as a mob, but as a tide. Controlled, angry, purposeful. You led them through the streets, not to riot, but to reclaim. At Vero's villa, the guards stood confused. They've been paid to hold back looters. Not this. Not a citizenry rising as one. Inside, Vero was waiting, dressed in his finest toga, lips curled into the beginnings of a speech. But he faltered when he saw you. He tried to speak, something about lies, conspiracy, foreign agents. But no one listened anymore. You handed him the scroll. Read it. He hesitated, then did. His voice cracked halfway through. Rome stood silent. And then, from somewhere in the crowd, take him. It wasn't a cry of vengeance. It was a sentence. You didn't need blood. You needed Rome to believe again. Vero was taken to the Senate Hall to answer for what he had done. That night, as the torches flickered and the stars watched in silence, you sat with Livia and Gaius, who was finally resting easy. You think it's over? She asked. You shook your head. Not over, but maybe beginning again. She smiled. Then let's make sure we get it right this time. In the shadows beyond, you saw a raven perched on a marble statue, watching, waiting, but did not move. Not tonight. The days that followed were quiet in a way that felt foreign. After months of unrest and whispers of betrayal, the streets of Rome no longer echoed with riots or screams. Instead, there was something deeper taking root, reflection. You watched it unfold from the shadows of alleyways, temple steps, and quiet rooftops. The people were beginning to speak differently, slower, with intention, as if they, too, were trying to remember who they had once been. The Senate convened again, this time not under fear or bribery, but necessity. They sat, with no audience but the ghosts of what Rome nearly became, and listened to testimonies from survivors. People who'd seen firsthand what power does when left unchecked. Livia stood before them, strong and unflinching, telling her story in simple words that pierced like arrows. About food shortages orchestrated from within, about planted fires, bought silence, and backroom promises. About the Raven. The senators couldn't argue. Most didn't. Many wept. Some resigned that very day. You were never meant to rule. That much you always knew. But you did become something else, proof that even in a world like ancient Rome, where life was short and politics brutal, one voice could matter. Even a small one. Marcus was released days later. Bruised, thinner than you remembered, but smiling. He had survived interrogation, threats, isolation, and never said a word to betray you. When you embraced him, it was the first time you truly believed Rome could be different. And yet, not everything could be fixed. Gaius passed quietly in his sleep. His body had simply run out of fight. You held his hand through the final moments, and when it was done, you lit the small fire by the river yourself. Livia wept as the flames took him, not just for him, but for all the years lost in fear and secrets. For everything Rome had swallowed in silence. You spoke at his memorial, not loudly, not with grandeur. Just a few words about loyalty, truth, and the price of it all. There were people listening who'd never known Gaius, but they stayed through the night, watching the ashes rise and scatter across the Tiber like dust from a forgotten age. After Vero's arrest, things didn't magically improve. That was never how it worked. But there were steps, small ones. The grain stores were opened and distributed fairly again. Corrupt magistrates were quietly removed, replaced by voices who'd been underground too long. The city that had almost eaten itself began, slowly, to feed its own again. But the question always lingered. What of the Raven? Vero had named no names. The scrolls he left behind hinted at something vast, something older than his own schemes. A network, a whisper chain, a plan to shape Rome in the shadows, not just for power, but for control. The true Raven, the soul of the operation, remained hidden. You spent months chasing leads. Some ran cold within hours. Others took you to dark corners of the empire, to Sicily, where coin was exchanged in catacombs beneath shrines, to Gaul, where mercenaries claimed to once serve a nameless patron who spoke in riddles. You found scattered feathers, but never the bird. Still, Rome held. Years passed. You began to fade from public memory, as most heroes do. That was fine. You walked the forum now as a stranger, content to see bread in the hands of children and no soldiers dragging people away for asking questions. Livia became a senator, unofficially at first, but later legally. She pushed through reforms slowly, carefully, without shouting. That was the way to win. With patience. She had learned that from you. From all of it. Marcus returned to the guard, but never took another bribe. He trained the next generation not just to fight, but to listen, to see people not as threats, but as citizens. There were nights he still woke up gasping, haunted by things he never spoke about. But he never gave up. One autumn, you found yourself standing in front of the old Senate again. Not as a rebel, not as a threat, just a witness. A child approached you, maybe 10 years old, curious. She asked you about the Raven, whether it was real. You told her it was. She frowned. Then why didn't you catch it? You paused before answering. Because some things aren't meant to be caught, you said gently. Some things you fight by reminding people they exist, and making sure they never forget. She nodded like she understood, though she didn't yet. But maybe someday. You walked away, not as a victor, but as someone who had survived the worst of ancient Rome. Not the blood or the wars or the chaos, but the betrayal, the slow rot of power, the price of silence. In the end, the empire would stretch farther, grow richer, and fall again, as all things do. But for a while, for a precious few years, Rome remembered what it meant to belong to its people. Not to the Raven, not to the corrupt, not to fear, to its people. And that, you thought, would have to be enough. And so, in the heart of a civilization that built colosseums with slave hands and bathed its streets in glory and betrayal, one quiet soul walked away. Not as a hero etched in marble, but as a reminder that history, real history, isn't always loud. Sometimes it lives in whispers, in choices, in the ones who refuse to forget. Thank you for spending time in ancient Rome with us tonight. If this story made you think, stirred something deep, or simply helped you drift into thought, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There's always another story waiting just beneath the ruins. Until next time, sleep well, and never stop asking what came before. continue for where the climax left off, and write 1,000 words wrapping up the story. This part should provide a satisfying resolution, answer any remaining questions, and conclude subplots. Leave the audience with key takeaways or reflections, making the ending memorable and engaging. Naturally, include keywords to keep the SEO optimization strong. End the story now in natural way. Also, do not make any headings. Only write story in paragraphs. Also, keep the wording simple and natural tone. Also, make the script human-centric and don't give feel of AI generated. Also, don't create violated content, which can affect YouTube policy. Years passed, and the days of fire, betrayal, and fear in ancient Rome slowly gave way to quiet mornings, routine markets, and the hum of normal life. The city never fully forgot what it had been through, but it began to carry the weight of that memory more lightly, like an old scar that no longer ached, but still taught you to be careful. What had once been a boiling pot of schemes and conspiracies now simmered under a more watchful eye. The people had learned. They had seen how power could rot from the inside, and how easily silence could be mistaken for peace. Livia continued her quiet campaign within the Senate. She had found allies, not many but enough. She introduced changes slowly, reforms to food distribution, new standards for accountability among the Praetorian Guard, and limits on how much power could be held by one office for too long. There was resistance, of course. Rome never changed without a fight. But she held her ground, never raising her voice, never begging for credit. Her speeches weren't grand, but they made people think. That was her strength. She didn't give orders. She invited questions. Marcus remained in uniform, though he no longer led raids or guarded temples. He became an instructor, teaching the next generation of Roman guards that their job wasn't to enforce fear. It was to protect order and preserve dignity. He rarely spoke of what had happened during those darker years, but he wore a small, bronze feather beneath his armor, always hidden, always close. Not as a badge of victory, but as a reminder. He hadn't defeated the Raven. None of them had, but they had survived it. That meant something. The whisper of the Raven never truly disappeared. In taverns and shaded corners of Rome, stories still drifted about hidden powers and masked leaders. Some said the Raven had moved east, deeper into the provinces. Others claimed it was never just one person at all, but an idea, a shadow behind every throne, waiting for the right time to take shape again. You knew better than to think it was truly gone. But Rome, for now, had grown wise enough to spot it sooner next time. That was enough. You no longer lived in the city's heart. You'd moved to the edge of the empire, where the air was cleaner and the roads quieter. Your days were simpler. You worked with your hands, taught children how to read old records, and watched the sun dip behind the hills without dread for the next day. Some nights, you still woke up sweating, the sound of Vero's voice echoing in your dreams. But those dreams faded quickly. The world you lived in now was safer. Not perfect, but better. Every few seasons, someone would come find you. A student, a young official, sometimes a soldier. They all asked the same thing in different ways. How did it end? What really happened? Why did you stop? You always answered the same way. Because the story wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to Rome. To those who stayed and rebuilt it. To the ones who'd never seen the Raven's eyes, but had grown up in the shadow of what it almost became. They would be the ones to write the next chapter. Not with swords, but with choices. Small, honest ones. And that's how civilizations survive. Not through war or laws alone, but by remembering what almost broke them. The forums now had statues again. Some were of emperors and warriors, as always. But one stood out. Small, tucked near the edge of a garden behind the Curia. It didn't bear a name, just a pair of hands holding a broken chain. Some people walked by it without notice. Others stopped, curious. Tourists asked who it was for. The locals never gave a clear answer. Some said it was for the nameless rebel. Others said it represented the people of Rome as a whole. You never corrected anyone. That was part of the story, too. Looking back, it wasn't the danger that stuck with you the most. It wasn't the fear or the secrets or even the violence. It was the way people looked at each other during those days, suspicious, guarded, unsure if they were standing beside a friend or an informant. That was what the Raven had really done. It had stolen trust, not just between strangers, but between neighbors, friends, families. Healing that took time. Years. But it did happen. There was no final battle. No grand reveal. Just time, choices, and the quiet power of people deciding to live differently. That was the real victory. Rome didn't collapse. It bent. It cracked. But did not fall. Not then. And maybe that's what makes the history of ancient Rome so impossible to ignore. Not its grandeur or conquests, but the way it constantly walked the edge of greatness and ruin. How it could be both a cradle of civilization and a machine of cruelty. A place of philosophers and tyrants, of progress and pain. And somehow, people still found ways to live inside it. To build. To resist. To dream. So, no. You wouldn't have lasted a day in ancient Rome. Not if you expected comfort or fairness or safety. But if you understood its rules, if you learned its rhythm and held tight to your voice, you might have found your place. Not as a hero in a book, but as one of the quiet ones who helped keep the soul of the city from slipping away. And maybe that's the lesson. Not just from Rome, but from all of history. It doesn't belong to the emperors. It belongs to the ones who endure. Thank you for joining this journey through the shadows of ancient Rome. The story may be ending here, but its echoes, just like the whispers of the Raven, live on. Sleep well, and remember what came before.